Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think might be underrated, underseen, or sometimes we just want to talk about them. I'm the host for this week, Josh Hallam, and I'm joined as ever by my co-host, Alice Oliver. Alice, how you doing?
Very, very well. Thank you, Josh. And yourself?
I'm all right. You're suffering a little bit though, aren't you, for the people at home?
Oh, well, I wasn't going to say anything.
Let's get some sympathy. Come on, milk it.
No, I was going to try and get through it. I was going to try and be strong. But yeah, listeners, I have got COVID. It finally happened. What are we, like 3 and a bit years into this?
Yeah.
And it's got me. So there's a bit of sneezing, bit of sniffling. I will try and keep it to a minimum because nobody wants to hear that. But just FYI, just in case a little sneeze creeps in there. But yeah, I'm okay.
I had it before it was cool. yeah. Everyone was like, "Oh, what's this new trendy disease?" And I was like, "Listen, I've already been there. Don't worry about it."
Done that.
Yeah, I did it before it had a name.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I don't know. Anyway, we are joined this week by another brilliant guest. She is a film director, another guest from the other side of the pond. Kymberly Harris, how are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And you're a sport. I hope you feel better. This is awful.
Thank you, Kymberly. I really appreciate it. I feel better already, to be honest.
So much more polite. Like, American guests are always so much more polite. Like, British guests is like, I'm ill. Yeah, whatever, get on with it. Like,
yeah, and what?
Yeah, World War II or whatever. Like, that happened. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for coming on and for accommodating us. In your busy work schedule. I know you've got a lot going on. So we always start these guest episodes, with a completely random question. So I'll come to Alice first and we'll see what we've got in the pot. So I asked again for people on Twitter and Instagram to give us their ideas. Got some good ones in there. Let's have a look. So we got this one here. This is from Rob Turner. Now, Rob's asked us a question before. He's always good for a question, Rob. So hello, Rob.
Go on, Rob.
He's at Reynard City on Twitter. He said, Alice, would you rather have your own giant super robot or the recipe for a really, really, really ridiculously delicious soup?
I mean the way I feel right now, I'd love a ridiculously delicious soup, to be honest. But if you've got the giant super robot, maybe they might be able to make you some ridiculously delicious soup. Do you know what I mean? Massive soup. I think I've got to go robot because of the versatility. Like, I've got the soup, but then at the end of the day, love soup, but that is just soup and it's just doing soup things. Whereas you get a robot, it could do anything, could clean your house for you. And that's all I really want in life, is for someone else to come and clean my bloody house. But it is a giant super robot. So I'd have to find somewhere to keep it. So then you've got to think storage solutions. Then that's just a nightmare. You know what? We'll go with the soup. I'd go with the soup for ease. I think ultimately that would be the simpler option. What about you, Josh?
I know what you mean about the robot making you the soup. I do. Yeah. But it's the big bit. If it's just a robot, we're talking like human-sized butler, like iRobot style or whatever, Terminators and all that. It's the robot. But if the soup,
massive.
Yeah, if you think, let's say it's like a transformer, that's how big it is.
That's too big.
But then they can, and I know they can turn into like toasters and cars and stuff, but it doesn't say. Rob's not specified. that the robot,
we don't know.
It could turn
if it's a transformer.
So my answer is really, really delicious soup, because I've got nowhere to put a giant super robot. Plus, let's be honest, the government will take it off you as soon as they realise you've got it.
Probably, well,
Government's not taking soup. Not bothered, are they?
No.
Not bothered about delicious soup. I can have my soup. I can have all the soup I want. What about you, Kymberly? Big robot or delicious soup?
You know, I am going to have to go for the big robot.
Big robot.
I want the assistance. I want, if I can tell it what to do, help cleaning the house, making soup would be good. I'm not going to let myself go into the catastrophic thinking of, the problems with AI and all this. I'm going to stay in my version of the robot and go with that it's going to be helpful. I'm going to stay with the robot. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got 2 for soup and 1 for giant. Suppose you're in LA, you've got the space. You've got the space for a big robot.
It's true. If I were in New York, I probably want the soup.
Just the soup. Yeah. Okay then, so let's move on to talking about this week's film then, which is Cyrus from 2010. So spoiler warnings if you guys have not seen it, although it is 13 years old, so you know. Kymberly, you picked this week's film, so why don't you tell the guys listening at home a little bit about what the film's about and why you picked it for the podcast?
Sure. It's a film by the Duplass brothers, and it's about a single mom and a recently divorced guy who meet at a party and really connect, and they hadn't been really connecting with people up until then. And then she accidentally introduces him to her grown son, who is still living at home. And it's really a relationship film. And and then the conflict unravels from the new boyfriend and the son crossing paths. All is revealed after that. Yeah,
absolutely. That's great. That's probably like the most succinct description of a film we've had from a guest. Quite often you end up being like, and then anyway, 2 hours in, there's a big fight, and then so why have you picked it then? Is it underrated? Is it underseen? Do you just want to talk about it? Why is it you've picked this one?
Yeah, I picked it because, if I'm feeling blue, I turn it on. It's such a raw human piece. I feel like it's tonally really walking this line, and the humor comes from real human interactions that are so believable. It's kind of a perfect little movie to me. And I don't, when I talk to people about it, they never have heard of it or watched it. And it's so rare that I'm pretty picky about comedy, because I really like this feeling of, being a fly on the wall and peeking in at someone's life and it feeling truthful. And a lot of times you get that in drama, particularly in independent film like this one is. But in comedy, it never stays in that, truthful tone. And this one really does. And it really makes me laugh. But it's also, kind of heartbreaking and very real. It really feels like a slice of life on the east side of LA that could very well happen, even though there are some outrageous things. The laughter comes from, very real situations. I
think that's a really good way of putting it, that realness, because like you say, with comedies, we'll come on to sort of the likes and stuff in a minute, but just to touch on what you said there, is one of the things I thought was, in another world, this concept of man meets woman, they get together, she has an adult son and the new boyfriend butt heads. That's a high concept tentpole Hollywood movie. It sounds like, if you think of variations on things like Who's Coming to Dinner, or more modern examples of like Meet the Parents, or even what's the one with Bryan Cranston and James Franco? That one, is it Why Him or Why Always Him, or something like that?
Why Him, I think.
It's like that, isn't it? And it's like, you can see the poster of them like back to back, like ooh. Whereas this, and all those are very big and they're very set piece driven and very like, almost rooted in farce. This happens, and before you know it, you've blown up the back of the house when all you were trying to do was sneak a cigarette or something like that. But in this sense, it's very real, and it's exploring a very real human story, which I really like. But let's come to you, Alice, then. Had you seen this one before? Had you heard of it before?
Hadn't seen it or heard of it. So I was very excited to dive into this and see what it was all about. Overall, my general consensus was that I really, really enjoyed it. I think there's so much to like in there, and it's pretty much a lot of what I like you've summed up really well there, Kymberly, but a lot of it is from this the authenticity of it, of the characters, of their relationships. Like, it feels real, and you feel like all the characters, you feel like they could be real people, which obviously makes them really relatable, which makes the viewer engage so much more with the film. So yeah, really positive impact on me overall. What about you, Josh? What was kind of your general consensus? Had you seen it?
So I hadn't seen it. I don't know if I don't think I've heard of it. I knew Mark Duplass because I'm a big fan of Safety Not Guaranteed. Which is a film which is actually also on my list for the podcast. So I knew about him, and I think they've done another film, but I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But no, overall, same as you. I really, really enjoyed it. I think this kind of film, we have a bit of a running joke in this podcast, Kymberly, which is I always say I like films that are like a slice of life, and Alice always laughed at me. But that's something that I really like, and I think that films like this definitely have a place. I think that it's almost in the same way kitchen sink drama became a thing in the theatre. I think this has its place in film. And I think it's telling, a bit like what we've already said, real feeling stories about real feeling people. I think unfortunately they're often overlooked because they maybe don't find a specific audience. They're not backed because they're not going to make $500 million at the box office or whatever. Every now and then, one comes along like a Bridesmaids or something like that, and it explodes. But then what happens after that is a load of films that are similar trail in its wake, and then it drifts off again and that sort of thing. And even those stories, even like Bridesmaids, I love Bridesmaids, but it's not this. It's not that social realistic. It's not as big as something like we've said, like, I don't know, The Hangover or something like that. But it's definitely, I suppose my point is, it's definitely, I feel like this sort of film has a place. And I think that you can see that in the quality of actor that they attract, because if you look at the cast of this, it's great. And they obviously like doing it. I think that a lot of them are drawn back to this sort of film because it feels real. And I think it's probably a nice palate cleanser for them and things like that. And I think it's almost the filmic equivalent of someone saying, I've went back to the theatre because the theatre's where I started. I think people go, I went back to indie film because indie film is where I started. Does that make sense, Kymberly?
Yeah. I mean, I think, something that's very plot driven is, those box office films. And this is character driven, and the characters are so layered. And as you said, John C. Reilly, Marissa Tomei, Jonah Hill. And when Jonah Hill made this, he was only known for the big Apatow,
and that knocked up
comedy,
Superbad,
and I heard Jay Duplass talking about how sensitive Jonah is, and how they, this is each character has so much pathos. And Catherine Keener, I mean, just great actors. And I know that the script was very solid, but then the Duplass brothers also really encouraged them to just improvise. So, and that's a technique I use a lot. I call it just I'll shoot the script and then I'll say, put it in your own words, because I think, it really, can ground you and help express new discoveries and give a kind of freedom. And so I thought that was really interesting to hear that, a lot of this was improvised by these actors once they were already really connected to, their own characters.
Yeah, I think so. The scene that comes to mind for me, which I made a big note about, which I really enjoyed, was, and it's right near the beginning, it's the scene where they're singing the Human League. So they're singing Don't You Want Me Baby by the Human League, and they're all dancing. Right. And that scene is so layered because it's funny. It's a really funny scene because it's sort of like a bunch of people who are trying to just enjoy themselves to sing the Human League, surrounded by lots of people sort of looking at them like, some of them are a bit quizzical, like, I don't want to get involved, but also that looks like fun. I want to go and sing and have a drink and dance and all that. And then other people who are just like, look at these nerds for singing along to the Human League and that sort of thing. But also, what happens is that scene is started because it's the first time in the film that John, the John C. Reilly character, is shown any sort of positive attention. And it's the first time he interacts with someone. It's the first time he gets any sort of something back off someone. It's really early on in the film, but it's obviously quite clear up to that point that he's depressed, he's unhappy, and as soon as he has that human interaction with Marissa Tomei's character, he suddenly goes, I want to sing, I want to dance, and it's almost like this sort of like it's lit a fire up him to be himself again. And I thought, so it's really late because it's funny, it's feel good, it's charming, but also it's that idea, it's that exploration of mental health of like, you know, you can suddenly get a buzz of being like, oh my God, actually it might all be okay. And then you sing in the Human League before you know it. Do you know what I mean, Alice?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's a really great way to start it as well, isn't it? Because you think that it's going to be, the impression you get when you meet that character is that, oh, this is going to be ages until he has anything positive to say or until he starts looking at the world positively. And it happens really quickly. So it's like, all right, he's not a total lost cause just yet. Like there is something there. He does still, like he wants people to look at him and think, oh, what a great guy. Or like, oh yeah, he looks like a lot of fun and all that. And I think you get a lot from that sequence, even though it's so simple. But I think the characters and the story and kind of what's going on around it really does convey a lot of feeling. So yeah, I really enjoyed that moment for sure. Shall I go over a few of the things that I liked?
I was going to say, let's
hear
what we thought about it. So start with you, Alice. What did you like about it? Hit us with the bullet points.
So yeah, bullet points. I tried to condense it as much as possible, but first of all, so I really like the style, right? So it's all obviously very simple. It's simple locations, simple props and costumes. And it's full of people that you could easily believe are real people, like we've said. And I think the shaky cam style gives it a real authenticity as well. And I think that really works with it and reminded me a lot of Succession at times with all the kind of crash zooms and the slightly crooked angles and stuff. I think the performances in this are excellent. So everyone felt like they were right where they should be. And they all came together so brilliantly to engage you with this world. Like no one felt out of place or miscast. And in this as well. So something that I've picked up on a few times in some of the films that we've done now is this thing that I call the chain of inappropriate behavior. So in this, Cyrus's behavior towards John is inappropriate and it's impacting John's relationship with Molly. But then the way John behaves towards his ex-wife, Jamie, is also inappropriate and is affecting her relationship with her fiancé, Tim. Yet John just seems completely oblivious to this. And there's just a few of these like little blink and you'll miss it moments with Tim. He'll like walk into the room and the two of them are having a conversation, or he'll say something and you can just see that it's really getting to him, but he's trying so hard to be patient and to be the bigger person. So the film never really dives too deep into it, but it's always going on in the background. And I really felt for Tim a lot because I feel like it would be a really difficult situation at the best of times anyway, not to mention when you're trying to plan a wedding, because obviously Tim and Jamie are in the midst of planning their wedding together. And it just feels like John really leans on Jamie a lot and is really involved in her life. And it feels like she's in a position where she feels emotionally responsible for him and has to devote a lot of her energy to him, which doesn't always feel that fair in my opinion. And then that brings me on to the next point that I really liked about the film, which is just the story in general and how it explores the different sorts of emotional baggage that you accumulate over time and how that impacts your relationships and how you see the world. Because I loved Jamie. I thought she was a great character and I loved Tim as well. And he's got like 3 lines or something, but he's always just there in the background, just kind of watching this happening, like this world that he can't quite be a part of. Because it's like, well, they've got history, like things have happened between them that I'm never going to know about. And he's just on the outskirts sort of watching in, like, what am I meant to do? But the film doesn't bat you with that at all. It's just the odd look or the odd moment. And I really like that about it.
It's quite realistic, isn't it, in that sense?
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, so let's hear from Kymberly then. Kymberly, what are some of the things you really like about this film apart from what you've already touched on?
Yeah, I mean, I love everything that you just pointed out. I mean, there's so much honesty. You've got, this dependency on, and he's still longing for this marriage that he had, and he's so depressed. And then this very, alluring woman approaches him, urinating outside at a party, totally drunk. And her first line is "nice penis," and it's like this really down and out man. And then this happens to him. And that's what sends him into the dancing inside. and I love the flip that so many everything that happens is unpredictable, because you think that he's met this perfect woman, but then when he meets her son, played by Jonah Hill, you get this idea that that's a very codependent relationship. The son doesn't want mom with anyone else. And, I think it's so honest and human, and the flaws are really disturbing and endearing at the same time. And yeah, it's, and I have to say, the scene where Jonah Hill plays his music for, mom's new boyfriend, it is so brilliant in tone. The response of John C. Reilly to that, he's really listening, and the weirdness of Jonah Hill, I think everyone needs to see that. To me, that is the funniest scene. One of the funniest scenes I've ever seen.
It's so awkward, isn't it? It's so
through the awkwardness, right? Yeah. The humor comes through very honest human awkwardness. Yeah.
I think because everyone's been there, haven't they? Everyone's been the guy who's like, listen to this song. Oh, okay. Right. Oh, have you seen this funny YouTube video? No, I'm okay. Oh, you're showing it me anyway. It's that. I think everyone's been there. So I know what you mean. I think that realism really, really comes through. And I just want to touch on something you said there as well, which is something I really enjoy, which is the relationship and the exploration of Cyrus's mental health, because there's a few things at play. The first thing I really liked is it doesn't spoon feed you as the audience. So it never goes, this happened, so he is like this, or this, this is why he is like it. It hints that he might be lying. It hints that he might not be lying. It sort of edges towards, yes, he is messing with John, but also at the same time, he's definitely got issues. It's not like all put on or whatever. So I like that bit. And the other bit I really liked as well was that exploration of codependency and intimacy as well, because it's not something, particularly with mothers and sons, that I've ever really seen done like this in a film outside of a horror. So a horror, you think of Psycho or something like that, where it's obviously exploring it in a way that it's the complete end of the scale of this feels unnatural, and they use that to execute a different type of feeling for you as the audience. Whereas this is far more real and far more interesting to me to explore that real codependency between an adult man and his mum.
Yeah, and I want to say something about that, because she is a single mother too. And I think that's very specific. We don't usually see her mistakes come out of overcompensating because there's no father. And it has caused his problems, even though, it's done out of good intentions. His mental health is because he has never left mommy's side, and so really believes that he needs that relationship to be his everything. And it's cramping her lifestyle, but she did it because she felt guilty, or and that's something that single mothers really can relate to. And I think that's something we don't see enough, really. And then the new boyfriend walks into that and has to deal with it. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think it's really interesting. It's just not something I've seen done before in this more realistic way, I suppose. Do you know does that make sense, Alice?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And thinking more about the thing of her being a single mother as well. And I hadn't really thought too deeply into that, but you're not going to get that much representation of that in sort of traditional mainstream cinema. So it was really interesting to see it. And I loved how you described their relationship as being kind of equally disturbing and endearing, because that's kind of the way I saw it. It's like everything's like really, really cute, and then something will happen and it's a bit like, oh, no, that was a little bit too weird. Like when they're wrestling and stuff in the park, it's like, oh yeah, that's sort of cute. But then like she's really latching onto him and all this. And it's like, oh, now you've made it weird. Like it always just goes like that one little step too far. And you just think, no, you've crossed the line now into it being weird. That moment that you mentioned there about when he's playing his music for John for the first time. So I think that's the funniest moment in the film. And I'd written that in my notes, that I thought it's it's the best example of the way that they use comedy in this. And I think it shows such a trust from the filmmakers or from the director in their actors to use their eyes, use their body language, and to be able to build the tension between one another. Because the whole, like, one of the sort of brilliant things about this film is, like, it's not big and fancy, like, it's not explosions, it's not, you know, all these kind of crazy plot points and all that. It's just the actors doing their thing. And the fact that the filmmakers have trusted them to do that has been really successful, and they all just nail it. But yeah, some of the comedic moments that stem from that kind of awkwardness, or from people maybe knowing something that you don't know just yet, but then we sort of go on this journey with the characters as they find out, really, really funny and really effective. So I thought some of the editing was quite strong in this as well. So you get a lot of moments where two characters would be in conversation with each other, and then the conversation would continue, but it would be, I don't know how to describe it, but the conversation would continue off screen as a voiceover, but you'd still be getting footage of the two, but it would be alternative footage of the two characters together shown on screen. So for me, it felt like this was a real opportunity to show the audience what the characters are really feeling and get some really genuine and authentic moments from the characters. So say if Molly and John were having a conversation and they're just talking like normal, like not talking about anything too remarkable, but then the conversation would continue and you'd still hear it. You'd hear the conversation continue as normal, but the shots you'd get would be different, and they'd be like of Molly smiling or looking really smitten or looking really happy at John. And I felt like these moments were really tender and quite personal and just did more to reinforce the authenticity of the whole thing. It's like you were seeing something that you weren't quite supposed to see. And like Molly had a few great moments where she just looked like she would just sort of be swooning, or she'd like have a t-shirt or an item of John's clothing or something, just be like, oh, and it was really, really sweet, really sweet. And I think I really appreciated that technique, but I've no idea what you'd call it. There must be a name for it. But I thought that was really strong as well.
I'm trying to think if there is a name for it now.
There must be. I just don't know how you describe it.
I don't think there is, but I think it is. I think the editing in this is incredibly strong as well. And that may have even been an editor's choice to really, make it feel more intimate. Like we are seeing, as you said, these private moments, and they're informed by almost the character's thoughts. The editing, and I also really admire the editing, because knowing that they were improvising, because that makes, I've done it to editors, and it makes it much more difficult to really edit it well. So that I love that technique of the editing as well.
Okay, so we'll move on then to talking about anything we would perhaps change about the film, or perhaps we didn't like about the film. I don't get the impression there'll be much in this section, but we'll start with you, Alice. Is there anything you particularly didn't like or you'd change about the film?
So I haven't written anything down for this, because
Wow.
I don't actually think, like, there isn't really anything. I really don't think. And I did try. I was trying to look for it. My only point would be that obviously this style of film isn't for everyone. It's not exciting. It's not like visually spectacular, but obviously that's not what it is, and that's not what it's going for. So literally all I can say is that this isn't going to be for some people, and I imagine it would bore some people, but not me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it definitely does have an audience, this sort of film. But in terms of like from a technical point of view, like as a film and how it was made, I don't really have any notes. so that's that.
Rare.
That is rare.
I'm trying to think of
what about you, Josh? Did you manage to make any points?
I know. I accept your point. I mean, look, this film is a bit of me, so I know we said before I like slice of life films, but I know what you mean. This isn't going to pack out a multiplex of people chewing popcorn, waiting for the car chase or whatever. But I think, like I've already said, I think it's got its place. I suppose there's 2 points for me. The first one is, and I don't really know how to phrase this, I wanted Catherine Keener and Matt Walsh to just get married and be happy. Like, as fictional characters, they were so likable. I was like, oh, he's ruined the wedding. Like, but I suppose they only have a little bit of a scrap. It's not like it's completely ruined or anything. So that's, and maybe a little bit more resolution around that as well. Like, was that her being like, I'm never speaking to him again because he ruined my wedding or anything like that. But then maybe we don't need that resolution. And the other thing is, just maybe for my own preferences, I would have liked maybe a little bit of more exploration about why Cyrus is like that. But then at the same time, I also understand that they don't want to spoon feed you. I do wonder somewhere if there is a draft that mentions that Cyrus has been through X, Y, and Z, and that's why he is the way he is. But that it might not be the case. I'm not too sure, but that would just be me. What about you, Kymberly? Is there anything, or do you have any thoughts on what we've said?
It's hard for me now to watch films since I've been directing. It's really difficult for me to watch films from a different perspective. So when I say I feel like this is a perfect little film, it's because I'm so impressed by what they achieved. And I think, I do think that both of their backstories would be really interesting, the mother and son, to have more of. And yet, when does that become superfluous to, the point of view, which I think is sort of this exploration of what is unconditional love. How do you, what is it? What are the boundaries of it? We're pushing up against those boundaries, and what do we need in the story in order to explore that. But yeah, I don't have any notes. The Class Brothers. I do not.
I mean, that's absolutely, you've picked it. And listen, it's not often that we have this little to say. We always try and be as positive as we can, but we're also all about balance. So it's rare that we have this little to say in this section, isn't it, Alice?
Yep, 100%. Like, if there was stuff I didn't like, I'd tell you, Kymberly, like, with respect and obviously balance. But yeah, it was just, it knew what it was, it knew what it wanted to be, and it nailed it every step of the way.
Okay, so let's move on to talking about the critical reception then, and then we can try and decide, is it underrated? Is it underseen? Is it both? Is it neither? You never know. So, do either of you know how it did critically or commercially? Have either of you seen the scores, or do you want to have a guess?
I mean, I'd love to hazard a guess.
Go on.
I think I've got to think that this did well. I think just technically it works, and I do feel like the critics would like this. What did it get? I think it got at least a high 7.
Okay.
I think maybe I think overall it probably got a 7.9, so the highest of 7s, just before an 8. And I would probably give it that as well.
Okay, great. Kymberly, do you know how it did, or would you hazard a guess if you don't know?
I intentionally didn't look because I knew and so the only thing I think it had going for it at that time theatrically was that was the beginning of what we called the mumblecore movement, which is when the Duplass brothers, Greta Gerwig, Lena Dunham, these great independent voices, all were releasing their films, and they were these humanistic stories.
Things like Frances Ha and stuff like that, isn't it? And yeah.
And so it was more in the, more than now, I think they were getting theatrical releases. But yeah, I really did choose it because I feel like it's a secret. Like I don't think anyone knows this film. But tell me, I'm very curious.
Let's have a look. So we do IMDb and then the 2 Rotten Tomatoes, and we average it out, and that average gives us the sort of idea of how it did, but then we also, if needs be, we sway it with how the critics reviewed it as well. So just depends on how we're feeling. At the time of recording on IMDb, it gets, I think you're going to be shocked by this, Alice, 6.3 out of 10.
Ooh.
The audience on Rotten Tomatoes, which is obviously similar to IMDb because it's audience review, give it 53%.
What?
And the critics give it 80%. On Rotten Tomatoes. So the critics did like it. The critics were kind to it.
Right.
But the audience are dragging that average down to an average just above 65%. So for me, I'll happily go first. That's massively underrated.
That's so easily underrated.
Yeah,
that is so
it's
easy.
One of the easiest decisions
Flipping heck. Flipping heck. What was that, 50? What was that from the audience?
The audience, yeah. I think the audience went in expecting something about Hannah Montana or a dad.
Right,
based
yeah,
on
mate.
the
Oh,
title.
yeah, maybe.
Oh
my goodness.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure I need to ask Kymberly, is that underrated?
Right. I mean, it's so interesting to me because, you know, do people go to the movies to feel something? Do they go to the movies to escape? Do they go to the movies to think, to not think? And it's, you know, this is a film that's going to kind of be confrontational in a way to make you think about your relationships and, you know, maybe laugh and cry about them. So yeah, it's so strange to just have, you know, a pool of everyone because everyone has such different tastes,
different reactions and stuff.
But I'm not actually that surprised because I know that, you know, my taste is this kind of really personal story, and that's, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I think me and you, Alice, I think it's fair to say we could say that's underrated from what you think. It's much better than that. But like you say, everyone's different. So very much opinion, isn't it? But my opinion, Alice's opinion, it's underrated, isn't it?
And it's our podcast.
And it's our podcast,
opinion
so,
is the only thing that matters.
In terms of its underseen, I mean, there's always an argument that we make that if neither of us has heard of it and both of us like films, it's pretty underseen. But the only figure I could find on Box Office Mojo was it made just under $10 million worldwide. So I'd say it's pretty underseen, and I think people should seek it out and watch it. So there we go, another one in the underrated, underseen vault, Alice. It's getting bigger, that vault, isn't it? It's almost 200 films have been through the process so far. Kymberly, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about this. It's been a pleasure to talk to you in general. Tell the guys out there what have you got going on. What can they look out for?
Yes. Well, a feature I shot in 7 days in Los Angeles, where I was really interested in, you know, there are a lot of young people in this city. I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Chicago. So I've been here for 11 years. And there's a lot of young people here that get famous very quickly without really any prep, and their life changes when that happens, seemingly overnight. And so I wanted to explore that relationship between, you know, youth and fame and addiction, actually. So it's a film called I Heard Sarah, and it's on all streaming, but it's also just what was released on Prime Video. So I hope everyone will watch it and rate it and review and help our ratings get up. And then I'm also in pre-production for a film written by Zan Churchwell that takes place in a high school and really deals with young people seeking their identity. And it's a companion piece to a feature. So we're shooting this Some Things Good Happen on a Tuesday. And it is that sort of me continuing to explore the fly on the wall, a very, you know, what really happens in these private moments in high school. And that will, then we'll shoot the feature next, which is called Tell Me Something Good. So those are two of the things I'm on right now. And I'm also creating a television series and adapting a memoir into a screenplay. So it's a very fruitful, creative moment.
Busy.
Loads going on. I'm still reeling from the fact that you shot it in 7 days. So I work in television, but I work on small scale stuff. And sometimes even just getting that done in 7 days, I'm like, I don't know how we did that. So that is super impressive. And I'm absolutely jazzed to watch it now, because I think I'll be thinking about that when I'm watching it and just be like, oh my God, they did this in 7 days. That's wild. I love that topic as well. And I think so relevant for so many people, like not just in LA, but pretty much anyone who becomes TikTok famous, which is just such a common thing now. Like you can go from being like, in air quotes, a nobody to being like known right across the globe in a matter of like hours or days. And the intensity, like just what that must do to kind of your brain and your outlook and all that. So yeah, I love the sound of that.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Same, I can't wait to watch it. So we will put links to anything, like I heard Sarah put links into the episode. We'll put some stuff out on social media when this comes out. So make sure you check it out. It's always good to support independent film. Kymberly Harris, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Kymberly.
Thank you. What a great way to start the day. This was really fun. Thank you so much.
Well, there we go. Another guest episode in the bag. Another underrated and underseen film. Give it a watch. It's always nice to find out new films. And I really enjoyed it, and so did Alice. So did Alice as well. And we'll make sure, as we said then, to put links to Kymberly's stuff in this episode. Check her out. It's always good to support indie film and people's projects and stuff like that. We will be back with another episode in your ears next week. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you just search for Just Films and That on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, give us a look. We're always putting stuff out there and engage with us and follow us. It's always nice to hear from you as well. If you've got a film, get in touch. We're on Patreon as well, if that's your thing. If you fancy episodes a day early or extended episodes, stuff like that, heading over to Patreon/Just Films and That, and you will find us. We're also on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. So every Friday from 6 p.m, you can find us on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. I'm also uploading all the videos to Dailymotion. And let me tell you, they're enjoying it over there, Josh. I'm telling you, our Grease 2 video has taken off. It has absolutely taken Dailymotion by storm.
Like
I'm absolutely thrilled to say. Yes. Exactly. That's in Grease 1, not in Grease 2. Grease 2 is about
flying cars
motorbikes.
exist in Grease 1, Alice. Flying cars exist in Grease 2. Don't get me started on Grease 2.
Don't get me started on Grease 2. And so, yes, plenty of ways to watch us, see us, hear about us. We're all over the damn place.
Yes, we shall see you next week for another film. Goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.